Here we go. It's hour number 2 of the G-Bag Nation on 105.3 The Fan, and our Combine coverage continues, brought to you by Yorgi Pet Care Connectors and East Dallas Diesel. Broadus is at the Combine where he's been all week, and sitting down with him now is Yahoo NFL insider Charles Robinson. Charles, thank you so much for joining us on the show. How you doing? We got you? We got everybody?
Yes, sir. Okay. Yes, sir.
There we go. Okay.
I'm sorry. We were chattering. We were talking about stuff. Sorry about that.
We were chewing on the fat.
We were chewing on the fat for sure.
Let's go, Charles. How good is the Combine as far as a place to talk to people and find stuff out for you?
It's still useful. It's not as useful as it was, say, 10 years ago. Like I could have, if you asked me 10 years ago, can you imagine like the Rams and the Jaguars not sending anybody? Can you imagine the Green Bay Packers coaching staff not showing up? I would have told you you're crazy. So it's definitely been interesting just sort of seeing teams pull back a little more on their personnel and rely on, tape, the metadata they get from colleges, film where they, scoop it up from wherever they need to get it and then decide to allocate their on-site resources elsewhere. So, but look, there's still, you come here, there's still people who are going to be here to talk to. There's still going to be agents milling around. There's still deals, getting done off campus, as I call it, or even on campus if you can get to the second floor of Prime. If you can get to the Peyton Manning room in St. Elmo's. I can't get those places usually, but I can catch guys coming and going out of it, and so it's still. I got here on Sunday and immediately had a meeting set up with a high-end executive from an AFC team, and it was interesting because I said, well, where do you want to go? And he said, well, let's grab lunch at the Capitol Grill. I'm like, that's right in the middle of everything. Everybody's gonna see us sitting there. And he's like, well, just don't make yourself obvious. I was like, I don't know. I'm 6'4" and about 3 bills. I don't know how I can do that.
What's the juiciest thing you've heard this week that you can share on the radio so far?
I think the thing when I got in that was kind of interesting that I initially didn't believe, but then as I've gotten a chance to talk to other teams, there's more of some traction, or at least the feeling. I call it dream casting because I still don't think it's real. But there's certainly a number of teams that think that Joe Burrow really wants out of Cincinnati. And that it's not going to happen this offseason, but that there are going to be some teams that if they replicate what happened in 2025, if that happens in 2026, their door is going to be getting beaten down by teams basically saying, hey, look, the 2027 draft's premium. There's going to be some teams that inevitably, the Jets are sitting there already with three first-round picks in the 2027 draft. So they're going to try to push this idea of, like, look, you're getting premium picks. There's going to be more first-round grades on your board. Let's make this happen. And I'm sure behind the curtains there will be some, hey, look, Joe, if you want out, kind of let's start pushing the issue and making something happen and get you out of Cincinnati. But I was surprised how many teams have that opinion.
Do you have a short list of teams of where he'd likely go?
I don't. I really don't. Because there's so much of it would matter. It depend on draft compensation. It would matter. Like I think Joe would have to pick his destination, and he's an interesting kid. He enjoys his privacy, but he also enjoys being in the public eye quite a bit too. And he's certainly worn his emotions on his sleeve, at times with the Bengals and that frustration. But I couldn't say I knew, I know some places I'd love to see him go. I mean, if Matt Stafford retires, I'd love to see him in LA. I'd love to see him with a great play caller. I'll put it to you that way. And also a team that has a personnel department that has shown the ability to trade away first-round picks and still build teams. And I think the Rams are a team that certainly did that for a number of years.
What do you think is most interesting about the quarterback potential movement for this offseason?
Ugh. I feel like it's a lot of scraps, guys. I'm not gonna. I think I've been tainted by looking at that 2027 quarterback class, what it could be. So I sit there and I'm like, man, it's just, are you really going to do this? You're going to go down that avenue this year if you could have some patience. And so, like, if you ask me, and I don't run the Raiders, obviously, but if I were the Raiders and I had somebody who wanted to get to that number one spot, knowing what the 2027 class could look like, knowing that certainly there are discussions to have about Mendoza and what the ceiling really is. Look, he's got 1 year of really good tape. The team all around him is fantastic. Good running game, good offensive line, great defense, extremely high-end coaching. Didn't have to spend a ton of games where he absolutely had to put it on his back to win. Now, that said, he's tough as hell. And will make throws, and he'll go out there and do exactly what you want him to do if you put him in the right scheme. But as one exec said to me, he said, he's Cam Ward. The only thing that you're getting is he won't throw it into a committee meeting every fourth play, and so he won't try to make these massive, crazy big plays. And now, obviously, that's what the rookie class. I think in terms of these veterans, I've just heard too much to believe there's going to be as much movement as maybe people think. Like, people are talking about Mac Jones. You're talking about, obviously, Malik Willis is going to get a big payday. I'm very curious to see what that ends up looking like. What the kid out of Houston, Davis Mills, another kid that it's like, could he potentially get dealt? But I just, none of these names to me, what are you getting out of Kirk Cousins at this point? What are you getting out of Anthony Richardson? Like how long are you going to chase the Anthony Richardson fairy tale? Like, we did that with Trey Lance, remember? And how did that turn out? And so it's just a number of, situations and scenarios where I think the guys that do get moved may be the best. And I see the reservations, but honestly, his good is so good. I mean, Kyler Murray does still have a ton of skill that he brings to the table. It's just everything else that scares you, right? What kind of teammate is he? How hard of a worker is he? That says a lot to me about how dubious, it is to go out this offseason and try to get that quarterback that's going to, step into play for you and then make things right for years to come. I think Sam Darnold kind of warped us. I really do.
Yeah. Charles, what do you think the market is for George Pickens?
So this is interesting to me. I think if Pickens had made it to the free agent market untethered, I think he would have gotten paid. But it's what I call the desperation index. It reminds me of a couple of years ago when Brandon Ayuk was going to do a $25 million per year deal with the Niners. It felt like that was going to get done. Then Amon-Ra St. Brown signs this huge deal, and next thing you know, Brandon Ayuk's like, hey man, I need 30, 31, 32, and the Niners are like, man, you really need that. Go out and see what your market looks like. Well, when he came back, the market was New England, which was in the gutter at the time. The Cleveland Browns is the Cleveland Browns. And what was it? Oh, the Pittsburgh Steelers, who were just desperate for a wideout at that point. And Ayuk was like, I don't want to go play any of these places. So, the Niners do the deal with him. He stays home. It completely blows up and melts down. I think there is a level of apprehension amongst other NFL teams about George that lingers even through this year with the Cowboys, and it comes from the Pittsburgh experience where you would often hear out of the Steelers, like, we need to get an adult in the wide receiver room. We love George to death, but we need an adult in the wide receiver room. I think, interestingly enough, if he plays on this tag with Dallas through 2026, I think teams will actually feel better about signing him or acquiring him after the 2026 season than they do now. I think there's just a little bit of a, what is, if we don't know that he's an adult, we don't feel like his personality is completely an adult, what is that going to look like when he's getting paid $28 million?
Now, what do you think about how he and his agent are going to handle the tag? Do you think he plays?
I will tell you, in my experience in this situation, I will not speak for David Mulugeta, but I will tell you most agents will tell the player, you're not going anywhere near the franchise until July 15th. We're going to wait and see whether or not we can work a situation where you could potentially work out a tag and trade, or just get a long-term deal in place. Obviously, the goal is the long-term deal to get that nailed down. I don't want to speak for it because that comes down to a personal decision between the agent and the kid, but I don't know many agents that are sitting there going, hey, if we got to the market, we're looking at, somebody would have been desperate enough to give you 35, and who who knows what the guaranteed money would have looked like at that point. At least 2.5 seasons of guaranteed money.
Charles Robinson, Yahoo NFL Insider. Okay, let's go back to the Raiders there and how likely it is Maxx Crosby leaves. Was there truth to that report that Trey Wingo had that he'd like to be out and play for the Cowboys if he had his druthers?
I know Max loves the Cowboys. I know that is absolutely true. I still think there is. You have the Raiders who are sitting there and they're saying, look, if we resolve the quarterback situation the way we think we can, if Ashton Genty we feel like is much more perfectly suited for the Gary Kubiak offensive scheme, I think there is a feel that they could turn this a little more quickly than maybe outsiders believe. And I understand the doubt. I'm there with you. I've been through that franchise how many years in a row and been, sold a bunch of beans, right? And but I think it comes down to what ultimately they feel like they could get out of Max, and they are trying now to mend it if they can. Obviously, the change, the coaching changes that have happened internally are one avenue, but really it's an issue between he and John Spytek, the general manager, and I think realistically, if he could get himself to the Cowboys, he would do that. And I even think financially, I don't want to say he would take a break, but I think there are some franchises, if he went out the door, he would want some kind of a contract tweak. I don't know if that would happen if he was able to get himself to Dallas.
Charles, when you're looking at the landscape, though, of the way that the draft is going, I know you said you've been working a lot on the pro side of things. Are there teams that have, how are they looking at this draft? Are they saying, hey, we need to back up as much as we can, get picks, or is it like this thing doesn't have the volume at the top? We're not going to trade up. We're not interested. Is anybody talking about what direction they're going to go?
Well, certainly there's no doubt, teams will take umbrage with the idea it's a bad draft. They'll tell you, look at defensively.
Yeah.
There's guys all over the place, right? And then you see what Styles just did.
Right.
And they're like, okay, so if I'm the Cowboys now, and I need to add to my defensive line, I need to add to my linebackers, I need to add to my safeties. You got 3 Ohio State kids who can help you at 12 now, right? And Styles running the way he did, that whole workout helps the Cowboys,
absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
That's a big deal. So I think there are a number of teams that look at it and say, look, in the top 60 picks, it's an unbelievable edge draft. It's unbelievable, edge plus defensive line draft. There are actually linebackers who are worth first-round picks this year.
Right.
And then there's, you got, 3 super legit safeties. You got, some corners. So defensively, I think a lot of teams are happy and certainly willing to select in 2026. I think if you have teams that are looking for offense, they are sitting there and saying, man, it would be nice maybe if we could scoot back a little bit and add capital in 2027. But it's funny, and this was right as the week kicked off, and I was just kind of trying to pick around, is this really a weak draft or whatever? A number of teams are just like, hey man, it's hard to get anyone to move 2027 compensation right now. Nobody wants to move off those picks. And it's interesting because inside the Jets, when that deal got done for Quinnen, and it was, we'll give you a 1 and a 2, figure it out. And the Jets were like, we want your 1 in 2027.
Right.
We want the better of whatever you've got between you and the Packers in 2027 because we know we're going to have more first-round grades on our board than in 2026. So, I do think, look, value is where you find it in this kind of draft. It's certainly there, I think, along the defensive line and in the safety class. And, in terms of the depth, well, no, I mean, obviously, Jory Epstein, and she and I were talking today, and she said that she had, a number of teams tell her that they felt like it was a really good running back draft. That kind of surprised me. And I said to her, I'm like, well, certainly it's not the top end. And she said, no, it's more toward, the value, the middle, where there could be a number of guys with skill sets coming out that can be developed into starters in the middle of the draft. That I understood. So, again, just kind of where you find the value that's going to lead this one, I think.
Haven't had a chance to talk to you about since Christian Parker was hired. Your thoughts of what your sources around the league and were they like, wow, Dallas really nabbed him one there?
Yeah, connector. He's a guy that definitely I think connects with players. I think it with The scheme was just such a poor fit last year, and so the sensibility there is that, it's like, okay, there's no longer this feeling where I think there were times where I was watching it last year where I'm like, if this is how you're going to play it, how many guys got to get peeled off this roster? Like, you have to, tear a lot of pieces out to make this work. I think now I don't think that's the case, but I just think, everything I've heard about him is just the relationships that he has with his players. They really love playing for him. He's very much the kind of a coach that players connect and also feels authentic. And I think that's a big deal because I do think there was some of that last year where there was just not connection happening between the coordinator and some of the players.
Charles Robinson, Yahoo, with you here in the Nation.
Charles, have you been given any indication that the Cowboys will be more aggressive than usual this offseason?
Well, let's see how they get the cap cleaned up.
Yeah.
I'd say there's a lot of work to do. What's how many draft picks are we talking? 7? Is that 7 picks this year for the Cowboys?
Yeah, but no 2s or 3s.
Yeah.
No 2s or 3s. So, what does that tell you? You have to, you're certainly going to have to go, and I don't know that there's a lot of those, out of the gate, first wave free agency kind of chases. I think it's going to be what Cowboys fans are used to, and that's just because of really what the cap situation is right now. You start to look in the wave 2 and 3 to see what value can you find amongst some of the veteran players. With the draft picks, look, you have at least some of the top end ammunition that if you wanted to move back a little bit and try and even the class out and add some picks, second or third day picks, there will be potentially the option to do that. But I just look at that cap situation, and there's so much work to do that I was trying to wrap my head around it. And what is it? Spot track.
Yeah.
They did a great job of, that was presented today, and I'm like, oh my God, okay, here, this is how, because I was having a hard time figuring out how with the $28 million tag added on top of this, how do you get, to at least the waterline.
We'll see them flipping a bunch of switches and stuff on some of these guys, don't you think?
I mean, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's going to be a lot of conversions. A ton of conversions. You can find money. I mean, there's no doubt in the cap today, you can find money. And with, the way the cap is moving, what are we at, a 50% hike since 2020? The cap has hiked like 50%, I think, since the COVID year, or the year after the COVID year, the rollback year. I think you're still going to see it moving, but I can also tell you the league would feel a lot better about how spending is going. They would feel a lot better about it if they could exit out of this TV deal, get the 18th game added, rework their TV deals rather than having to wait for the CBA. Because I truly believe NFL owners right now I think some of them are getting a little nervous about, are we getting a little toppy in the U.S. market, realistically? And so I think that's why you're seeing this really, there's going to be this push for this 18th game, and there's going to be a push for the international market because they're like, we got to start squeezing money out of other markets here. Yeah. We need to start in the 18 to 45 demographic overseas. We need those kids who have been watching the last 10, 15 years start becoming NFL fans and spending and signing TV deals overseas to help grow this pie.
Charles, you've been more than generous with your time. If I could be greedy, do you have anything on Minkah Fitzpatrick for us? Is he going to be moved by Miami, and what would it take to get him?
I couldn't tell you price right now. I'd have to go and look for comps on it. I mean, Miami is motivated. I mean, I think they're motivated to move off a number of guys that no longer fit the window, and I think that's definitely Minkah right now. And honestly, I wish I could tell you definitively how the quarterback situation is going to work out there. I mean, just because it's the hit they have to take is so immense to eat that situation with Tua. But I would say that Minkah is definitely on the short list of avenues they have to try and basically move themselves into a different window, because the whole win now window is not happening for them, and Minkah is definitely that kind of a player.
Terrific stuff as always. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great weekend, and we'll catch up with you soon.
I appreciate you guys having me.
Salute. There he goes, Charles Robinson, Yahoo NFL Insider, with you here in the G-Bag Nation.